All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodesh. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. All right, going to be a continuation, all right, of Daniel, the 11th chapter. Um, Picking up from where I left off yesterday. All right, but before I do that, I want to go and recap a bit, dealing with verse 18 and 19. All right, and basically, one of the brothers, all right, had left a comment. All right, I believe his name was uh, damn, was it Nawum? It escaped me at the moment. Um, oh boy, hey, Salakia, it left my mind, but yeah, he left the precept on there, which I was, that precept I was looking for, but the spirit didn't hit me with it yesterday, so I didn't bring it out. But it's a very good precept. All right, linking perfectly. All right, with with the with the history. All right, and so we're just gonna get it real quick. Okay, now this is the book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 18. It says, "After this, he shall turn his face onto the isles." All right, now this is dealing with Antiochus the third. Okay, it says, "He shall turn his face onto the isles, and he shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach, he shall cause it to turn upon him." All right, so going into how the Romans basically, intervened, all right, and stopped Antiochus. Okay, and then it says, "Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, where he shall stumble and fall and not be found." Okay, that's going into, once again, Antiochus' death. So now we're going to get a precept on that. All right, we read the secular history on it, going into the Battle of Thermopylae and the Battle of Magnesia. All right, so now going in here into the book of First Maccabees, all right, chapter 8, verse 1. All right, so it says, and this is the precept the brother put up. All right, but it says, now Judas, all right, now Judas had heard of the Romans, that they were mighty and valiant men, and such as would lovingly accept all that joined themselves unto them, and make a league of amity with all that came unto them. All right, it says, and that they were men of great valor. It was told him also of their wars and noble acts, which they had done among the Galatians, and how they had conquered them and brought them under tribute, and what they had done in the country of Spain for the winning of the mines of the silver and gold which is there. Now, remember, at the time of Judas Maccabees, all right, when Judas, the Maccabean revolt, starting with Mattathias, and then the brothers, this is after, okay, this is after what we're reading about in Daniel 11 and 18. All right, so that's why it's saying that Judas heard about this, and is going to recap sort of what the Romans did, because the time of Judas Maccabees is dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes. All right, and Antiochus Epiphanes comes after this Antiochus the third that we're talking about. Okay, so it says here, verse 4, and that by their policy, talking about the Romans, and patience, they had conquered all the place, though it were very far from them, and the kings also that came against them from the uttermost part of the earth, till they had discomfited them and given them a great overthrow, so that the rest did give them tribute every year. All right. Now it says, beside this, how they had discomfited in battle Philip. Now, if you've been, watching before, all right, Philip, all right, was one of those that Antiochus made a pact with to come against Egypt, but that ended up putting Philip the fifth of Macedon in a bad position, because then that led to the second Roman Macedonian war. All right, and we're reading about it right here in the book of First Maccabees. Okay, so it says how they discomfited in battle Philip and Perseus, king of Kittim. All right, it says, and with others that lifted up themselves against them and had overcome them. How also Antiochus the Great, king of Asia. All right, and that's the same as Antiochus the third. All right, that's him. Okay, so he's mentioned of in here also. All right, So it says how also Antiochus the great king of Asia, that came against them in battle, having 120 elephants with horsemen and chariots, and a very great army, was discomfited by them. Remember, we went into the battle of Thermopylae and the battle of Magnesia, where Antiochus fought against the Romans. All right, he fought against Rome, but what? He ended up losing. Okay, as it says, he was discomfited by them. All right, and it says what? And how they took him alive and covenanted that he and such as reigned after him should pay a great tribute. Going back to what we covered, the Treaty of Apamea, that was that covenant. Remember, and he had to pay that war indemnity. He had to pay tribute to Rome. All right, what was that each year? But also a part of the Treaty of Apamea was that what? And give hostages, all right, and that which was agreed upon. See, and we once again, when you look up the Treaty of Apamea, that's exactly the conditions of it. All right. It says, and the country of India and Media and Lydia and of the goodliest countries, which they took of him and gave to Eumenes. All right. It's all in there. All right. So this goes to show you also how, the scriptures it's valid, man. Okay. It's valid. There's no reason for the scriptures to lie. All right. But this right here, all right, goes in. You can link it with Daniel 11 and 18. The prince, for his own behalf, causing his reproach to cease. That's what's recapped here in First Maccabees 8. How Antiochus went up against the Romans and lost. All right, and then he ends up dying. Okay, so now that we're done with that recap, we're gonna go continuing. All right, at Daniel 11 verse 20. So now Antiochus III the Great is dead. Okay, and so who comes up next? Well, let's pull up. Let's see, Antiochus Great. All right, so here we have Antiochus. We have Antiochus III. Now, when you go to the issue, going into his children, all right, he had, I believe, a son named Antiochus. He had Seleucus IV Philopater. He had all these other children as well. Cleopatra the First Syra, which we already know the story about her getting married to Ptolemy. And then he also had Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Okay, so the two main ones we're going to focus on as we continue on in the chapter is Seleucus IV, all right, Philopater, and Antiochus IV Epiphanes, all right, which were sons of Antiochus III the Great. All right, now for verse 20, we're going to deal with Seleucus. All right, because Seleucus Philopater, all right, was the next to rule after Antiochus III died. Okay, because at this point, Antiochus IV is now hostage at Rome, pursuant to the Treaty of Apamea. Okay, so Daniel 11 and 20 picks up. It says, then, all right, after Antiochus III's death, then shall stand up in his estate, okay, a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. Okay, and this going into Seleucus IV Philopater. He's the one who basically came up in the stead of Antiochus III, came up and reigned after him. All right, and the story of that is what we're going to read in Second Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. How he sent Heliodorus to go and get the treasuries from the temple, because Seleucus still had to do what? Pay that tribute to Rome. Okay, and it says what? But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle, because when you read it in the secular history, it says that after Heliodorus returned, he ended up poisoning Seleucus. He ended up killing him. All right, which we're going to read that as well. So Seleucus didn't die in battle, in like some rage and wrath. But if he was poisoned, more than likely it would have been through deception. Okay, so now we're going to read here about Seleucus, a little bit about him in the secular history. So it says Seleucus the fourth Philopater. All right. It says here, ruler of the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire, reigned from 187 BC to 175 BC over a realm consisting of Syria, all right, now including Cilicia and Judea, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, and nearer Iran. All right, now it says here he was the second son and successor of Antiochus III the Great and Laodice III. Seleucus IV wed his sister Laodice IV, by whom he had three children, two sons, Antiochus and Demetrius I Soter, and a daughter, Laodice V. Now, as we're about to read, Seleucus was actually that war, the Battle of Magnesia, that his father, all right, and the Romans fought, and he was actually in that battle as well. Okay, so it says here during the prelude of the Roman Seleucid War, Seleucus was put in charge of the reestablished colony of Lysimachia by his father. Upon the outbreak of war, Seleucus commanded his own force, unsuccessfully besieging Pergamon and taking the city of Phocaea. It says, before fighting in the Battle of Magnesia alongside his father. After their defeat at Magnesia, Seleucus was made co-regent in 189 BC, so he was ruling with his pops. It says, and the Seleucids reigned, or the Seleucids signed the Treaty of Apamea with Rome in 188 BC. As part of the treaty, Seleucus oversaw the supply of grain and scouts to Roman and Pergamene forces during their campaign against the Galatians. All right, which I believe we missed it. I closed the page, but in First Maccabees, the 8th chapter, it also tells you how the Romans went against the Galatians. All right, so it says here in 187 BC, Antiochus died. The father of Seleucus, he's dead. All right, so he's dead. Seleucus's brother, Epiphanes, is hostage at Rome, and Seleucus is out here reigning. It says in 187 BC, Antiochus died after looting the temple of Bel in Elamias, and Seleucus took over as Basilius, which means king. So that's why it says here, they shall stand up in his estate. In whose estate? In Antiochus' estate, a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, which was Seleucus the fourth Philopater. All right, it says he renewed an alliance with the Achaean League and almost joined in Pharnaces, the first invasion of Galatia, before reconsidering and turning back. He also substituted his son Demetrius instead of his brother Antiochus IV as a hostage in Rome. And that's late, next time when we go into verse 21, that's when Antiochus IV, pulls up. All right. So remember, the treaty was you bring a son. All right. Whoever's the king, you got to bring a son as one of the hostages. So now that Seleucus's father is dead, there's no need for Seleucus's brother to be the hostage. Now you need a new hostage, which is the son of the king. All right. And so that's why it says Seleucus substituted his son, Demetrius, for his brother, who was the previous hostage at Rome. Okay. And in the death, it says here in 175 BC, all right, Seleucus was assassinated by Heliodorus, one of his leading. So hold up. Heliodorus is mentioned here. He was a real person, right? So when we read in 3rd Maccabees and it mentions Heliodorus and what happened to him, you right there, Heliodorus, right? His treasurer, So we're going to read about him. So how do people turn around and say, well, the Bible's really fairy tales, really was written by man, But anyway, it says Seleucus was assassinated by Heliodorus, one of his leading bureaucrats, who was then replaced by Antiochus IV with support from Pergamon and was concerned about Rome following recent disputes. So now we're going to read about Seleucus and Heliodorus, all right, in the scriptures, all right. The reason that he was called a raiser of taxes and, really how he affected us, right? So now this is the book of Second Maccabees, chapter 3, verse 1. It says, now when the holy city was inhabited with all peace and the laws were kept very well because of the godliness of Onias the high priest, his hatred of wickedness, it came to pass that even the kings themselves did honor the place and magnify the temple with their best gifts. And so much that Seleucus of Asia, all right, we just read about him, That's the fourth right there. The fourth, Philopater. It says, of his own revenues bear all the costs belonging to the service of the sacrifices. But one Simon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city. So they had like a disagreement. It says, and when he could not overcome Onias, he got him to Apollonius, the son of Thracius, who then was governor of Seleucia and Phoenice. All right. He basically went over there. He's like, yo, he's salty, right? He's salty. He couldn't overcome Onias because Onias is the high priest and he was just the governor. All right. So he was on the lower level. So because his ass was salty, he went up to the governor of Syria. All right. And this is what he went and told him. He says, and told him that the treasury in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifices, was innumerable, and that it was possible to bring it all into the king's hand, which was not the case. But what? He was salty. He was mad. So he went and did that. Now, this is important because remember, Seleucus, he bared the revenue, right? His own, out of his money, he bared the cost belonging to the sacrifice. So if you got Simon, right, going and telling the governor that, hey, the temple is full of riches that aren't even, being used for the sacrifice, because the king is supplying us with money, helping us out doing the sacrifices, but we got so much money in there, the gold and stuff that's not even being used for the sacrifices is a lot that this is money you could give to the king. He could, he could pay the tribute to the Romans, whatnot, right? It says, and when Apollonius came to the king, so now he goes to the king and he says, hey, by the way, one of the Jews came up. He said, in the temple, they got all this treasure there. You sending all this money. They're not even using it for the sacrifices. And it's just there, So it says, now when Apollonius came to the king and had showed him of the money whereof he was told, the king chose out Heliodorus, his treasurer, and sent him with a commandment to bring him the foresaid money. So forthwith Heliodorus took his journey under a color of visiting the cities of Seleucia and Phoenice, but instead to fulfill the king's purpose. Now, when it says the color, it's not literally talking about a color like blue, black, yellow, but meaning the pretense. He came under the guise of, oh, I'm just visiting the cities, so on and so forth. All right. But really, he came there because the king had sent him on a mission. It says, and when he was come to Jerusalem and had been courteously received of the high priest of the city, right? They received him nice, welcomed him. He told him what intelligence was given of the money, and declared whereof he came, and asked if these things were so indeed. Right. So I hear that you guys have all this money in the temple, all this extra money in there, and the king basically wants me to come and get it. All right. And that's exactly why I'm here. It says, so he says, so is this true? Is that the case? You guys have all this money? It says, then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children. Right. So, yeah, we have, we got money in the treasury, but we don't use all our money for sacrifices because, we still have some that we, use for widows and, the fatherless children. Because to be a widow, all right, to be a widow it wasn't like an easy thing, right? Because you gotta understand here, you a single mother, you getting all these benefits, these little teats. Back then, if you were a widow, your husband died, and the family didn't take you in or anything like that. You were pretty much on your own, because the husband was but he was the head of the house. He would provide and bring the food and work and so on and so forth. So that's why sometimes some widows would sell themselves into prostitution so that they can make money, or else they'll literally just be out there. So that's why the Lord, when you read in the laws, there's a lot of, things or laws that, those who have it better than others are supposed to follow. All right. So that those that don't have it like that can still survive. Like having a field, and when you have your harvest, you're not supposed to take everything. You're supposed to take whatever you can take, and leave the rest for what? The widows, all right, and the poor, because the widows wouldn't have somebody to provide for them because their provider is dead, all right. So yeah, it was rough, okay, but that's why the Onias was telling him, yeah, so he basically explained that to him. That's why we have this money here. So if they needed something, they could come and then we would be able to provide for them. It says, and that some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of great dignity. Now, I want to look up Hyrcanus, because there were, we know about John Hyrcanus II, but there was actually one before him, which I believe is spoken about in the book of Josephus. All right, let's see, Hyrcanus, son of Tobias. Okay, let's see if this is him. It says Tobias. During the All right. Hey, what I'll do is, I'll read it over, all right, another time. And if it is the same one, I'll come back in the next, the next series and, bring it out, whatnot. But nonetheless, Hyrcanus, the son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, all right, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed. Because when you read in the book of Josephus, it gives you some more, information dealing with like the little transition period, where the scriptures in the Old Testament stops at the book of Malachi, picks up again at the book of Matthew, and then you have the apocryphal books, all right, which Maccabees, like we're reading right now, all right, but there's some extra details, certain characters here and there that in the Josephus, all right, they'll tell you about it, but nonetheless, Onias is explaining to him, and some of it belongs to Hyrcanus, so that it's not like we just got money sitting here and we're just just wilding out. All right, it says the sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold, and that it was altogether impossible that such wrongs should be done unto them that had committed it to the holiness of the place and to the majesty and inviolable sanctity of the temple, honored all over the world. All right. But Heliodorus, because of the king's commandment given him, said that in any wise it must be brought into the king's treasury. So he said, look, so when you think about it, like it says, because of the king's commandment. So it's likely that the king told him, look, I don't care what they're using it for. That's money that's not going to the sacrifice. Bring it back to me. So he's out here like, yo, that's the king's orders. It does. Hey, I hear you. It's for the widows. It's Hyrcanus, but it ain't for the sacrifice. It's extra money. The king said I got to bring it. All right. Verse 14. So at the day, all right. So at the day which he appointed, he entered in to order this matter. Wherefore there was no small agony throughout the whole city. But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their priest's vestments, called unto the heaven, unto him that made a law concerning things given to he kept, that they should be safely preserved for such as had committed them to be kept. Then whoso had looked the high priest in the face, it would have wounded his heart. For his countenance and the changing of his color declared the inward agony of his mind, meaning that he was in such agony, he was so sad, so distraught, that if you were to see Onias, then you'd probably start crying. Like you'd feel so bad, because you could tell how much pain, all right, he was in. Okay. It says, for the man was so compassed with fear and horror of the body, that it was manifest to them that looked upon him what sorrow he had now in his heart. All right. So he was, damn, just imagine, all right, a high priest, just imagine the condition he would have been in. It says, others ran flocking out of their houses to the general supplication, because the place was like to come on into contempt. Because Heliodorus says, hey, I'm taking the money regardless, you know. And you got, Jake is coming all out. Hey, and it's very similar to when Ptolemy Philopater wanted to go up into the temple, into I believe it was the Holy of Holies, and they try to stop him. Jake coming out everywhere like, yo, everybody's, crying and praying to the Lord. All right. It says, and the women girt with sackcloth under their breasts abounded in the streets, and the virgins that were kept in ran, some to the gates, some to the walls, and others looked out of the windows. It says, and all holding their hands toward heaven made supplication. Then it would have pitied a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts, and the fear of the high priest being in such agony. Then they then called upon the Almighty Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, to keep the things committed of trust safe and secure for those that had committed them. Nevertheless, Heliodorus executed that which was decreed. So he's seeing all of this. He's seeing. I mean, you can tell. All right, that Jake is just going through it. All right, but nonetheless, he's still his mind is, look, I'm following orders, man. Right. So it says, now as he was there present himself with his guard about the treasury, the Lord of spirits and the Prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of God and fainted and were sore afraid. And you gotta really imagine, because the time is gonna come in this time period that we're living in, where the enemy is gonna come in like a flood. And see, this time they're not gonna try to come after a physical temple and try to steal that treasury, but they're gonna come after us. Okay, they're gonna come after us. And just like then, we're also going to cry unto the Lord. And just like the Lord delivered us then, he's going to deliver us now, as he said. Okay? So we can expect miracles because it happened before. Now, did the Most High stop existing? No, he's still there. And he said that he's going to deliver us with an even greater deliverance than he did back then. All right? Now, when you read it, the Lord didn't, he was there, but he didn't send an apparition in the middle of the day and everything is all good. No. But when the enemy came in, when it looked like there was no way out, when they cried unto the Lord, because they literally in their minds, they understood that if the Most High doesn't do anything, we are done. And that's the position we're going to be put in today. All right. In this day and age, when they come after us, your family's not going to be able to save you. Nobody else is going to want to save you. Everybody's going to be on their, for the most part, on their side. All right. So who else are we going to be able to look towards? All right. The one and true living power, because he's our power. Okay. So it says, so they see this great apparition. All right. And they're shook up. It says, for there appeared unto them an horse with a terrible rider upon him, and adorned with a very fair covering. And he ran fiercely and smote at Heliodorus with his forefeet. All right. And it seemed that he that sat upon the horse had a complete harness of gold. So imagine that. All right. Out of nowhere. All right. You see a horse and a man on that horse, and you already know this has to be an angel from the aura, from how angelic he was. Okay. And he's not dead just for show. He comes and he kicks the shit out of Heliodorus. Boy, you better step back. Okay. It says, so he had this harness, complete harness of gold. I mean, that must have been a glorious sight. Now imagine how Israel was feeling actually seeing the Lord fighting for you. I mean, damn, man. Verse 26, it says, moreover, so it wasn't just one. You had the angel that came on the horse, but then in addition to that, moreover, 2 other young men appeared before him. See, so it shows you that, number one, the angels are not little naked babies. All right. Notable in strength. So if something is notable, all right, let's look up the word notable. All right. It says very worthy of attention or notice, remarkable, right? So it says they were notable in strength. Now, when you look at somebody, right, how can you tell if this person is strong? Just by looking at them. Well, you look at their size. All right. You look at, well, today they'll say that this person looks jacked or brolic or ripped or torn, whatever. Okay. So that means that they're looking at them. You can see that they were built. All right. That's why their strength was notable, meaning that there had to be something about them that stood out so much that when you looked at them, you said, nah, they got to be strong. All right. They're not, all right. They're not light work. Okay. So you have these two young men, they appear, all right, strong as hell, excellent in beauty. Because what? They're the angels of the Lord. The Lord ain't gonna have no, deformed, you know what I'm saying? But it says, and calmly in apparel, who stood by him on either side. So he got his ass kicked. Then there's a angel on his right and the angel on his left. All right. Oh man. He was really about to get that work. All right. So it says, and scourged him continually and gave him many sore stripes. So they basically jumped him. A divine ass whooping. Imagine that. Imagine that. You get your ass kicked, literally, and then on your right, on your right and on your left, there's two angels. Now, just witnessing the angels appear alone is scary enough. But they beat his ass continually. That's the scary part. All right. You know when you see Jake jumping somebody and you're like, yo, chill, chill, that's enough? Yeah, nah. They weren't about to chill. All right. You know what I'm saying? There it says they gave him many sore stripes. They were whooping his ass continually, one after the other, after the other, after the other, you know. Had him looking like that Mr. Krabs meme, looking left, right, he's disoriented. He's hurt. All right. He's hurt. So it says, and Heliodorus fell suddenly onto the ground. Now those angels had to hold back, with each stripe, with each hit, because it really would take just one hit to put him out of commission. All right. It says, and Heliodorus fell suddenly onto the ground and was compassed with great darkness. That's it. He was done. It says, but they that were with him took him up and put him in a litter. Thus him that lately came with a great train. So he came ready, right, with a train to what? It says, and with all his guard into the said treasury. All right. He came with a train because he's thinking, all right, I'm about to take all the money in the treasury. All right. But instead it says they carried him out, unable to help himself with his weapons. And manifestly they acknowledged the power of God. So when they saw that, oh my gosh. All right. It says, for he by the hand of God was cast down and lay speechless without all hope of life. So this man was really, they really beat him to the point of death. Okay. What you thought? Did you think that what his soldiers were gonna come and try to pull the angels off? Or we're sorry, maybe that's enough. No. All right, they're like, look, I mean, I wish I could help you, but I'm gonna just stay right here. And when they leave you, then we'll come get you. All right. So he lay speechless. He couldn't speak. All right. He was basically like a vegetable about to die. It says, but they praised the Lord that had miraculously honored his own place. For the temple, which a little afore was full of fear and trouble, when the Almighty Lord appeared, was filled with joy and gladness. So you got to imagine this. Jake wasn't just like, so quiet. Nah, they out here roll, praising the Lord. All right. Yelling, screaming. All right. Sounds of joy as they're watching Heliodorus get his ass beat, praising the Lord. Because what? The Lord is fighting for them or fighting for us. Okay. It says, then straightways certain of Heliodorus's friends prayed Onias that he would call upon the Most High to grant him his life, who lay ready to give up the ghost. All right. So they begged him, no, please, look, just pray for him, because you prayed, you guys prayed, and he got his ass beat. So if you pray, maybe the Lord will hear your prayers and allow him to live. So the high priest, suspecting lest the king should misconceive that some treachery had been done to Heliodorus by the Jews, offered a sacrifice for the health of the man. All right, so he said, look, man, if we just let him die, I mean, what you think he's gonna believe that angels came down and whooped his ass? He's gonna think we probably set him up, killed him, and he's probably gonna come with an army, wage war, destroy, do something. All right, so they sacrificed for Heliodorus. It says, now as the high priest was making an atonement, the same young men in the same clothing appeared. So they beat his ass, disappeared, came back again. All right, as he was making atonement for them, or for Heliodorus, and stood beside Heliodorus. All right, saying, give Onias the high priest thanks, in so much as for his sake the Lord hath granted thee life. All right, so be thankful to that man. All right, because of his prayer, all right, you lived. All right, imagine how scary that is. You get literally beat to the point of death. All right, and then they pull up again. And then they tell you, man, you know what I'm saying? You lucky. All right, because had Ananias not pray for you, man, we would have seen you in the spirit world. All right, so it says, verse 34, and seeing that thou hast been scourged from heaven, declare unto all men the mighty power of the Most High. And when they had spoken these words, they appeared no more. So Heliodorus, after he had offered sacrifice unto the Lord, and made great vows unto them that saved his life, and saluted Onias, returned with his host to the king. Then testified he to all men the works of the great power which he had seen with his eyes and felt. It says, and when the king Heliodorus, who might be a fit man, or I believe it should say the king asked, so really, it should say the king asked Heliodorus, all right, or something to that effect, who might be a fit man to be sent yet once again to Jerusalem. He said, if thou hast any enemy or traitor, send him thither, and thou shalt receive him well scourged. So you want to punish somebody? That's the kind of people you send over there. All right, it says, if he escape with his life, all right, if you're going to receive him well scourged, if he escapes with his life. For in that place, no doubt, there is an especial power of God. For he that dwelleth in heaven hath his eye on that place, and defendeth it, and he beateth and destroyeth them that come to hurt it. So what you think the Most High is going to do in this time? What you think Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is going to do for his elect in this time? All right. It says, and the things concerning Heliodorus and the keeping of the treasury fell out on this sort. All right. So that's the account of what happened. Seleucus, Heliodorus, basically the little information on that. And then when you go into the secular history, it tells you that same Heliodorus, all right, when he returned, assassinated what's his name? Seleucus. Okay. And so going back to Daniel 11 and 20, that raiser of taxes is dealing with Seleucus, Philopater, all right, and basically how the story we just read and how he died. All right, so I'm gonna end it here. Okay, next, the next video is when we're gonna go, all right, into dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes, all right, and how he comes, and we all know how much of a demon he was. Okay, but like I said, that's pretty much it for that. So Lord willing, this was edifying unto the elect. All right, in closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kudash. Until next time, Shalom.